using Zoom or
Okay.
other
Okay, we're live now. It just kicked in. Hi, everybody. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. This is William Ramsey. Today I have a very special guest. Comes to us all the way from the great country of South Africa. His name is Norman, and this will be a part 2 of a show that I've titled, or he's titled, 9/11 Revisionism. So if you're watching this at first glance, I suggest you go back and look at our previous show. The video is available on X, Rumble, and Rockfin. And so we're just keeping on this. It might be 3 parts. We might get through it all today. I'm not really sure. I do have another interview in 3 hours, but Norman is going to kind of give us an overview of what we did last time and then lead up into this new second part. So Norman, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me back. Okay, so we're basically talking about 9/11 and all the narratives around it and the tug of war between various talking heads and all the various disinformation that's out there. In the first episode, we basically covered the difference between a normal building collapse, what a controlled demolition using bombs and stuff is, and then what we saw on 9/11, which was actually a disintegration of the buildings. We also touched on the strength of the building with relation to the planes that flew into it and how that couldn't take the building down. We also went into the whole psyop of what was presented to the American public with regards to it being a collapse, which it obviously wasn't. We went into the lack of rubble in relation to what a controlled demolition would be, where you would expect 12.5% of the original building height. And when you look at the rubble pile of the Twin Towers, it was 3%. So there was a major discrepancy there, even though people would want you to believe that everything was ejected laterally in 600 feet in all directions. And the main way that you can know that didn't happen is when you look at the plaza next to Towers 1 and 2. There was a 27-foot sphere in the middle of that plaza, and that sphere wasn't buried under rubble. We also touched on the 16 survivors in stairwell B between floors 2 and 22, and the 9/11 surfer Pascal Buscelli, sorry if I'm butchering the name, but he was on the 22nd floor, fell around about 17 stories, landed on a perch, and when he woke up and looked up, excuse me, all he saw above him was blue sky. He only suffered a broken ankle. He wasn't blinded by flashing lights, deafened by loud explosions. He didn't burn from molten metal. He didn't get irradiated from a buried nuke in the basements. And he was back home with his pregnant wife 8 o'clock that evening. And at the same time, you also had the 14 other first responders. They are all still around. You can go look for Mickey Cross and his interviews on YouTube. He hasn't suffered any major medical setbacks as a lot of the first responders have had over the last 20 years. Then we also looked at all the strange artifacts in the rubble, what was there, what wasn't there, and basically where other first responders said that if you wanted to survive 9/11, you had to be a piece of paper. Because if you can think back to how much dust there was all over the lower Manhattan, and there was a lot of paper as well. Then with regards to guys talking about buried nukes or the lack of rubble due to a nuke being buried in the basement, well, when you go look at the basements, you would see that it was basically hardly damaged. Most of the vehicles in the parking garages were driven out from where they were. And then we also looked at the fact of seismic readings. The Twin Towers were 500,000 tons each. So if you bring that down in a controlled demolition, you would expect that rubble to slam onto the ground and leave a noticeable seismic trace. And we pointed out that there was a lack of a seismic reading in relation to the weight of the buildings, and then also how people like Richard Gage, David Chandler, and these guys flounder when you ask them about the seismic readings. So that's basically it that we covered in the first hour. So if you haven't watched it, I suggest go give it a watch. And now we're going to go on with the rest of it. And we're going to look at a video pertaining to Building 6. Building 6 was right adjacent to Tower 1 and the North Tower. It was an 8-story building. And everybody knows about Lucky Larry and Building 7 talking about his whole pullet aspect. But the actual pullet for 9/11 was Building 6. The reason it's the real pullet is when the guys wanted to bring it down, they were scared of damaging the bathtub because the Twin Towers were actually built in the Hudson River, and the area was basically cordoned off with what you would call a dike or a retaining wall to keep the water out from the Hudson River, and that wasn't damaged. If that bathtub was damaged, you would flood the whole of the lower Manhattan. And when the damage, some damage was actually done, and that was when they brought in earth moving equipment, not by 500,000 ton buildings worth of rubble slamming down on the ground. So if we can just quickly listen to the demolition team and what they were talking about with regards to Building 6.
All right, let's do it. Is there audio in this?
Oh, there's audio, yes.
Why isn't it playing? Okay. Let's take that out, remove, and let's try again. Video file. That's number 10, right? Building 6.
Yes.
Well, this is not coming through. Let's try a different one, see if that works. Let's go to 11, video 11. Okay, I'm trying to figure out why this isn't working. It should be.
StreamYard's been giving you a little bit of trouble lately.
Yeah. No, it's. I'm being abused. It's an abusive relationship. I get kicked off. The audio doesn't work. I mean, it is crazy. All right, let's try. Let me try this. Let me try another option. I'll open it this way. Let's go back to 10. And then let's go share screen. Lord. Can you hear that?
I'm not hearing anything.
Okay, I hear it. Let me try this.
It might be my.
No, it's not you. I can hear it, but it's.
Okay. If you can hear it, that's fine. Hopefully, the audience can hear it.
No, I mean, let me try this. Share. Let me see. What is that one? It's not that. Okay. No, that's not it. All right, let me try this again. Let's see if this will work. Oh, okay. Let me try this. Video 10, open. No, it should have the audio. I just don't know why the audio isn't working. Camera audio. I'm gonna try another option. I don't know why this isn't working. It usually works. That's the whole thing. It's like
it worked last time.
You sure did.
Through everything.
Sure did. Share screen. Window. Share a tab instead. Why isn't it up on this tab? Let me try this. Let's do this. Share. File. Let's do this. Edit. Open file. Okay, let's try this. This is another workaround. Can you see that now? Let's try this.
You can see that, yes.
Can you hear that?
There's audio, yes.
Okay.
Oh, we're getting ready to pull building 6.
We have to be very careful how we demolish building 6. We were worried about the building 6 coming down and then damaging the slurry wall, so we wanted that particular building to fall within a certain area.
Well, we've got the cables attached in 4 different locations going up, and they'll be pulling the building to the north. It's not every day you try to pull down an 8-story building with cables.
So it's an 8-story building. We had a 110-story building next to it, and they're afraid that they're going to damage the retaining wall. So that's already got to have people sit up and notice. Now, this is very important for building 7. Everybody always goes on about the poor Jane Stanley from BBC who was reporting on building 7 going down 20 minutes beforehand, and everybody has just managed to forget or conveniently forget about CNN that reported on it 1 hour beforehand. So just we can quickly play this and hear how he's talking about building 7.
We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, building 7 in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing. And you, to be honest, can see these pictures a little bit more clearly than I, but building number 7, one of the buildings in this very large complex of buildings that is the Trade Center, there were, and that is the right way to put it, there were the 2 towers, but then there are a number of support buildings around it, retail spaces, restaurants, office space, garages. The trains come in from New Jersey, bringing commuters, taking commuters back, come into the complex that is the World Trade Center. And now we are told that there's a fire there, and that building may collapse as well, as you can see. Rose Arce, one of our producers who has been slowly and diligently making her way to the building, described the fires that she saw in the area of the towers themselves. And clearly those fires continue to burn at about 4:15 Eastern Daylight Time today in an unbelievable.
So 4:15, they were reporting on building 7 going down. So yeah, that is. And then with regards to Larry Silverstein, people always gravitate to his little bullet statement that he made. But when we move into this information now, you'll basically see that there were no explosions and stuff going on, and people need to realize it was a big psyop that was put into play. And do you really think that if Larry Silverstein was planning to have the building demolished, that he would actually let the cat out of the bag? There's a better chance that he was actually covering up something else, and he was trying to have people be railroaded or pushed into the controlled demolition using bombs and all of that kind of stuff, because bullet is deemed a demolition term. But when we look at this video, and you'll just basically see that it was not a fire-induced collapse, and it was not a controlled demolition using any kinetic mechanisms.
Right, thermite or whatever, right?
Needless to say, Of all of the many cameras filming around Building 7, not a single one of them picked up these alleged massive explosions as the building fell.
Vendors who have food or supplies. The firemen have no food, nothing but snacks. They need fluids, they need water, and they need protein foods. This is just the beginning of what they're facing. And we need masks. We need TB masks. Holy shit! What is it?
Just went down.
What just went down?
World Trade 7.
It did go down before.
No, 7. Number 7.
Oh my
You were just told by police that you should move out of your apartment, Fabiana. You've got Carolina here.
Yes. They advised us to leave because we have.
Oh my God! Look behind us, please. Pan in this way, please. Be careful of your baby. This is it.
That's the building coming down.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! No! No! Listen. We'll be all right. We'll be all
Just the sound of rushing wind. That's it.
Yeah, 100%. Yes.
Gonna go. That's coming here.
Find me any controlled demolition that is silent. And don't come at me and...
Where's
okay,
the boom? There was supposed to be an earth-shattering boom.
Yeah, where is it? Dude, it's not
go
there.
watch. Yeah, go
We
watch.
could do a whole show on
Yeah.
controlled demolitions, watching
Yeah.
buildings, silos, and it's usually boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom, boom. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And then also, if we can just go to the next picture real quick.
Yeah, let me see if I can get that up.
Number 13, lucky number 13.
There it is.
Now, also something that you'll notice whenever people try and sell you the controlled demolition aspect with regards to Building 7, they will play the videos without any audio. Because if I'm telling you it's a controlled demolition and you see the building falling and there's no sound of explosions going off, then obviously you're going to start asking difficult questions. And there's always talk about the explosions. People heard explosions. Yes, things were exploding, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bomb. You can put an egg in your microwave for 20 minutes and that thing eventually will explode. So does that mean that your egg is a bomb? And keep in mind, Building 7 was a 47-story building, weighed around about 230,000 tons. Then you had a controlled demolition of the Seattle Kingdom. The Seattle Kingdom weighed 130,000 tons. And it was 20 stories. It was concrete. When it went down, it left a seismic reading of 2.3 on the Richter scale. Now, when Building 7 went down, what seismic reading should we expect for that building going down? What would you say?
Probably more than 2.3 on the Richter scale, I would say. 47 stories, right?
Yeah. And what would you think if I tell you it was a 0.6? And there was no primary wave, no secondary wave of on the seismograph. It was only a surface wave. It was as if the weight of the building was taken off the ground.
Right.
And during the whole day, people say there was no real fires, and obviously there were no real fires, but you had this type of what seems to be smoke from the top to the bottom out of one face only, and for the whole day, it just kept going into the upper atmosphere. And just because it looks like smoke doesn't necessarily mean that it was smoke. And what Dr. Wood basically says is it was as if the inside of that building was slowly but surely turning into dust, where you had the two towers that went down and got dustified within around about an hour's time. This was put into the microwave on a slow cook. And by 5:20 p.m. the afternoon, it just didn't have enough structure left to keep the outer shell of the building still standing. So That is why you've got such a low seismic reading for it. And if you go into the NIST reports, they never tested any of the steel of World Trade Center 7. And again, if you look at the rubble pile of Building 7, if you use your calculation of 12.5% in relation to the height of the building, you should have around about 6 or 7 story high rubble pile. And the rubble pile was only about 3 stories high. And when it came down so neatly that it didn't even spill over the road to the post office right next to Building 7. So that's something very, very strange. That's fire-induced collapse or controlled demolition does not leave you with seismic readings without a S or a P wave, and it doesn't also leave you with such a low seismic reading. In 2022 or 2024, there was a rock concert with Taylor Swift, and her audience started jumping up and down and ended up with leaving a seismic reading of 2.3, and that's a stadium full of people jumping up and down. And if you go look at the seismic readings for the Twin Towers, the one building was 2.3 and the other one was 2.1, and that's for 500,000 tons. So where you would expect somewhere in the vicinity of around about 3.5 to 4 on the seismic reading. So again, remember, whenever people play you things about Building 7, they'll play you clips about people hearing explosions and all of that, but let's go find out what explosions the people possibly heard, because I don't think a lot of people have heard about this information that we're going to play in the video number 14.
Okay, let's go. 14.
Air tanks and water tanks were not located on every floor, but were spaced consistently throughout the height of each tower. During the destruction of the towers, air tanks and water tanks were ruptured, which would send their contents squirting out at speeds relative to the pressures in the tanks.
People have to see these squirts ahead of the collapse wave, but what was that? If it's bombs, you'd see a flash and you'd see a whole lot more of them. But if you have the whole building turning to dust as it comes apart, what about the water tanks that are distributed throughout the building? They're going to get weaker and weaker as they're dissolving until they suddenly give way. And I'm tempted to believe that might indeed be what that is. We don't know. But if you got that whole building down on the ground in like 8 seconds, let's say 9.5 seconds, just to give it some extra, it would have to be squirting out here at the base at minimum of Mach 1.5. The air from the middle to get to the outside is like Mach 2.5. For sure, all of the adjacent buildings should look like they were machine gun fired. That's a lot to stuff to squirt out of the way. And that's assuming the building took, 9.5 seconds to come to the ground. Now, people who say, okay, they claim they heard explosions. And so therefore it must be bombs in the building. They're starting with assuming what did it, and then going back to assuming what problem they're solving, instead of determining first what happened. Well, if you recall, blasting zone ahead, turn off cell phones and two-way radios just in case it triggers something. How are you going to get everyone to unknowingly turn off all their cell phones in southern Manhattan for weeks ahead while they prepare the site? But there were sounds of explosions. Bombs go boom, but not everything that goes boom is a bomb. Think of putting an egg in your microwave oven. Turns out there's a lot of folks who talked about these Scott packs exploding at ground level, sitting on the fire trucks.
Firefighter Patrick Sullivan says there was this huge ambulance. It must have had Scott bottles or oxygen bottles on it, and they were going off. You could hear the air go spoom, and they were exploding. So we stretched a line and tried to put that out. Firefighter Todd Heaney says, we were just starting to put out the car fires and the rigs were going, ambulances. I mean, there must have been 50 of these things burning heavily. The Scott cylinders and the oxygen cylinders were all letting go. They were all blowing up left and right.
And so we have to ask ourselves, what if these air tanks were being influenced by this energy which was destroying the World Trade Center, and it caused the walls of the air tanks to weaken? We know that the air tanks are pressurized, so what are they going to do? Same goes for any pressurized tanks inside the World Trade Center, such as fire extinguishers, such as some of the components in the pressurized toilet systems in the restrooms and so forth. If there were any pressurized tanks there, or hydraulic tanks that were under pressure and their walls were weakened in some way, then they would explode. So that might explain some of these explosive sounds in the buildings during the destruction, perhaps.
So that is something that people don't really know about. New York paper actually had all the testimonies. You can actually find it on their website. I think it's a PDF of, 7,000 pages with all these first responders' testimonies. And you can go work your way through that and find these testimonies there. And that's what a lot of other people who are trying to sell you on other narratives also did, but they cherry-picked some of the testimonies that they wanted to use that just covers their narrative. But again, if it's a building collapse due to jet fuel and office fires, what caused these Scott cylinders and Scott packs and stuff on the ambulances to explode? There were also other weird and wonderful anomalies with regards to vehicles parked close by to the World Trade Center, when Dr. Wood basically coined the term toasted cars. And what people would want you to believe is when the dust cloud came over, it was filled with tiny microspheres, and that is basically what caused all the vehicles to spontaneously combust and had their engines completely melt away. And sorry, but I just don't buy that, because you had people in this major dust cloud. They didn't get burned. You've got trees everywhere that still had all their leaves and everything on it, never mind all the paper around. And then if you also pan, there's a lot of videos where they are panning over the destruction in the vehicles and everything, and in the background you can actually see flags on flagpoles that are still fine. They didn't burn. So how the hell can a flag be okay? People can be okay, trees and stuff can be okay, but you've got
paper,
1,400 vehicles?
None of those papers are burnt too. If you see the paper that comes out of the Twin Towers, it's like intact. Like, why isn't it coming down smoking or something? Doesn't make sense.
So we can play the next video, because this will quickly just give an overview of the vehicles as well.
It's 15 toasted cars.
Toasted cars. We got to get to the toasted cars. I say they're toast. They're history. I can't say they're burnt because I don't know that. But they're toast. I just decided to use that word to say something happened, messed them up. You can't fix it. You got to get a new one. But this one is quite interesting in that it has an abrupt, toasted, not toasted. Like it's like it's on the showroom floor. It just had a new wax job back there. What abruptly stops a real fire, a regular fire, doesn't do that. It would be lapping around the corner. Also, why aren't the lights melted?
I didn't hear of any fireballs rolling down the streets, and cars were going into spontaneous combustion. They were there was no fireball that hit them. They just simply burst into flames for one reason or another. There was even a car park blocks away that the cars started smoking and catching fire, and no one questioned that.
Various detractors like to say that the cars got towed. I don't know about how some of them were, but I know these were not towed. You can see them before and after. And you can see cars adjacent to each other. One might be okay, and the other one isn't.
The other one's fine.
There are witness accounts of what happened to some of these cars too. For example, Patricia Ondrovich, who was a first responder, she, I think, came out of World Trade Center 7, and the cars were exploding right next to her.
The FDNY vehicles were remarkable. There were enormous ladder trucks, pumpers that looked like they were thrown around the fields like toys, and they reeked of unimaginable loss.
It's incredible. Do you know if these burnings took place before the buildings fell?
There were actually reports whilst the two towers were still standing that they were talking about these vehicles that are just burning. And the people assumed it could have been from falling debris or something like that. But no, it was just too far away. And then you can still also see people panning over the destruction, and you can hear pop, pop, pop. And even after the two buildings dropped down, and there's one of the guys who was standing next to the south tower, and in the background you could see how a car exploded as well. And what's strange enough as well, you can have a car here that's completely and utterly mangled and toasted and just gone, then another one that's flipped upside down or flipped right on top of another vehicle, and a vehicle next to it that's 100% fine. So again, it's strange. It needs to be looked at, and you can't just say, oh, there was some hot iron microspheres in the dust that caused all of this. Sorry, that's something else was going on. And then something that the 9/11 truth movement has been very, very good in is conditioning people not to count past 3, because for the last 20 years, all that they've been talking about is building the Twin Towers and building 7, when there are major anomalies with World Trade Center 3, World Trade Center 4, and World Trade Center 5 and 6, and then also the Bankers Trust. The Bankers Trust was initially damaged. They fixed it, and after they fixed it, they found that there was something not right. They were talking about that there are dust samples, and there's something in the building that's very toxic, and they ended up taking that building apart. Now, building 3 was the Marriott Hotel right next to both towers. There was only a small little clump that you can see in the bottom right, at the right hand side of the building. 14 people survived in that, and right next to it is World Trade Center 2. That's the building that went down first, and it basically had the top part that was busy tilting over towards building 4. And you would expect, if that was a rigid body of the top part of that building, it would be slamming down onto the ground and would be laying on the ground next to building 4 or on top of building 4. But 75% of building 4 up and disappeared. There was no damage in the sub-basements underneath building 4, but the body of building 4 disappeared. You had weird and wonderful holes in World Trade Center 5, and then you had the middle of World Trade Center 6 that was scooped out, and it was empty. It wasn't due to falling debris or anything like that. And I've got to remind you again of that sphere that was in the middle of the plaza that wasn't buried underneath any rubble. And even if you look at this LiDAR that was taken between the 9th and the 23rd of September, even the rubble and stuff that was on building 6 and building 5 and building 4 was only a little bit of aluminium cladding, or mostly aluminium cladding. Here and there you did have a solid, or some of this the steel core that was there. So the next 2 pictures that we're going to look at is the 3D printing of the buildings, and you can get this off the website, and you can put it into your printer, and you can print yourself the before, and then you can also print the after. So if you go into the next picture, you can see what was left, and that was what was left of those 2 massive towers. If you go to the next picture, everything was just gone. You would expect on 12.5% of 110 that you should have had 2 piles of 13 stories. And that's, remember, the Marriott Hotel that was next to the Twin Towers, that was a 22-story building. So you should have had a rubble pile that was that size, and it wasn't there. It wasn't in the basements. It wasn't carted off immediately. On September 12, the guys on ABC was talking about, but where did all the rubble go? And that was the only time they really talked about that. And then all of a sudden, the spin stories came from Giuliani. No, but we had 80 dump trucks over the first evening. But sorry, 80 dump trucks is not going to move 28 stories worth of rubble in 12 hours. So again, people saw things there was a lot of steel there, but there wasn't enough. And if you basically took all the steel that they used to construct the Twin Towers, and you laid those steel beams end to end, you were supposed to have a line of 500 miles worth of steel. So even if you look at the pictures afterwards and go try and play pickup sticks, you're not even going to build a third of the two Twin Towers. And bombs, thermite, or whatever can't turn steel into powder. I would love somebody to show me that. And they'll just not be able to do that. Now, the other aspect that started off after the building's demise is you had the 100 days of smoke, where people were talking about, there was these major infernos in the rubble, and the guys had to hose it down and everything. But unfortunately, that again was another cover story. So if we can just pop on to the next picture, picture number 17.
17. Yes.
No, it's right after these two. Yes. So you had the satellite pictures that basically picked up what they said was fires and high heat. And in the area E, they basically said is 819 degrees Fahrenheit. But you can see the picture there with all the firemen wading in the water. Now, what happens if you go, you can go look for videos on YouTube for molten iron slag and what happens to it when it gets into contact with water. It causes a major explosion. These guys that are standing in this water, you don't see any steam coming up. You don't see any boiling water. You don't see these guys being cooked like a fried chicken or anything like that. There was a lack of heat on the rubble pile. It was a cover story for an ongoing metal transmutation that was still taking place for that time. And even when the guys went into the basements, I think it was CNN and ABC or some other news agency, you couldn't see any signs of major fires in the basements either. And there were also no pools of resolidified molten metal whatsoever. So we can go on to the next video where we can hear a little bit more about the lack of heat at ground zero.
NASA thermal imaging shows that the fires were out and temperatures were no longer hot by September 23rd, 2001. What can cause long-term fuming without generating significant heat?
At dead of night on America's Remembrance Day, stilled for the first time since the rescue work began 2 months ago, even now, there is a sense of awesome, gruesome power. Only the hoses continue to try to damp the continuous fires beneath. The grappler creeps as deep as it dares and lugs at still steaming steel bramble, lifts it then to higher ground for yet another grappler to bash it into shape, and lift it again into a waiting truck. And in this hour, this is happening in 50 spots across the site.
They identified 4 classes of particles in the World Trade Center air samples.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go over to where were we now?
That was 17.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, the guys were talking about this molten metal, but you never saw any pictures about it. And they were talk that it was plain disinformation. And this is the Bible to prove to you with a lack of high heat. It's fused into concrete, and it's got what seems to be molten metal that moved over the pages of the Bible. And if you know what the combustion temperatures of paper, concrete, and all of that, then an artifact like this is virtually impossible. Now, the next video will be Bob Grenier from the Martin Fleischmann Project talking about this Bible and what he's done. There was a gentleman that we talked about, John Hutchinson, and he was replicating the work of Nikola Tesla. And what Nikola Tesla could manage to do with a static field and with his Tesla coils and Van de Graaff generators is he could manage to get metal to levitate, metal to split. He could manage it to become rubbery, where you could basically stick your finger in it and not burn, and it'll leave your fingerprint there, and also managed to have it glow white hot or yellow hot, but it was cold to the touch. And he was actually employed by Colonel John Alexander at Los Alamos Labs in 1986 to replicate the experiments he was doing in Canada at his home. And at the moment, Bob Grenier from Martin Fleischmann Project, he's got some of John Hutchinson's samples. His stuff has been sent all over the world. But if you go and Google his name, the first things that will come up is just a bunch of people slagging him off, saying no, but he faked stuff. And that's usually a bunch of articles and stuff that was all written before 2010. And the people are now currently busy replicating his experiments, and also what the guys did with his experiments is when he had TV crews in the 90s come to him, and he could replicate it every single time, sometimes for up to 7 hours at a time. And again, the metal samples are there for people to go and investigate. He was selling the stuff off eBay. And again, how can you say the guy's doing making fraudulent videos if he's got the samples to show you that most people can't explain? So let's listen to what Bob Grenier had to say about this Bible.
Hi, my name's Bob Grenier, and today I'm asking about inconvenient reality, when what you think you know is challenged by what you see. On March the 30th, 2002, whilst in the base of the South Tower, the fireman in the yellow in this picture found and brought an item to the photographer who took this picture, Joel Meyerowitz. That object Joel is holding in his hand here. In the video from which this comes, he says, "It's a Bible melted to a piece of heart-shaped steel." Now, just think about that for a minute. Just think about what he's said. It's a Bible melted to a piece of heart-shaped steel. Here's a close-up. Now, if that wasn't strange enough, or maybe you don't get why it's strange, the particular section from the Bible, the page that was open, was Matthew 5:38-39. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. So, of course, this struck the photographer as quite profound. What struck me as profound was that he said that this Bible was melted to a piece of steel. Really? Paper ignites at 451 degrees Fahrenheit or 233 degrees C, and there are some steels that can soften and melt at around 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit or 1,370 degrees C. For this to actually have been melted together, the paper would have ignited, or at least be a little bit brown.
And in the Orthodox Church next to the South Tower, I think, they had a picture of Mary, and the picture was a sacred relic for them, and it was in an aluminium frame, and they found the painting in the rubble, and the aluminium was gone, but the page of it was not burned either. So that's enough, and they call it. You can go look for the article on the internet and just search for the 9/11 miracle, and you'll find the article about this religious relic that they found. Now, a while back in 2012, Jesse Ventura had his series Conspiracy Files or Conspiracy something, and he also went through the whole rigmarole of thinking that the government was correct, and then he had his queries. He went through the whole thermite aspect. He then did his a special on the work of Dr. Wood and John Hutchinson. I think he titled it Death Ray, due to the fact that Nikola Tesla mentioned before he died that he developed some sort of death ray. And he spoke to a NASA guy. The guy from NASA basically told him that he was working on the Star Wars program. They perfected it, and they've got some sort of weapon that can basically decimate cities. And 2 days after he had that interview, that gentleman all of a sudden died of a heart attack.
Wow.
Now, this interaction here is Alex Jones and Jesse Ventura talking about the molten metal and the high temperature disinformation that was put out by the US military guys who were in control of Ground Zero, and just listen to what the two of them have to say to one another.
You have the videotapes, the firefighters reporting molten metal like a slurry or a steel mill or a volcano. Those are quotes. Giant pools.
What about the pictures of them dragging oxygen hoses all over the steaming supposed hot metal? If it were that hot, you wouldn't dare do that, would you?
Well, we do have the infrared photos of the molten metal.
Well, again, what melted the metal? Was it heat?
That's a very good question. It's also one of the first times I've heard Alex Jones speechless.
And the thing is, that was...
Here's this famous...
I'm sorry.
We can go the last 14 seconds, yeah.
You want me to keep playing? Yeah.
Yeah, we can go on with
USGS
Dr. Wood
image
talking about the...
Folks say is evidence that it was high heat. They claim that at point E, it was 819 degrees Fahrenheit. Water boils at 212 Fahrenheit. This guy doesn't look like a boiled chicken.
So the thing is, after that interaction, a bunch of people have actually asked Alex Jones to have a conversation with Dr. Wood or have her on or anything, and he's basically been flat out denying such requests. And even in 2019, on the Joe Rogan podcast, along with Eddie Bravo started talking about Dr. Wood in her book, and he tried to basically shout Bravo down, and Joe Rogan actually mentioned that he's got a copy of the book as well. So all three of these guys have their own podcasts and everything, and that was in 2019, and ever since then, not one of them have ever had her on. And as I say, since 2012, people have been asking Alex Jones to do that, but he's not interested in it. So why? He loves conspiracies, and he likes talking about turning the frogs gay and all that kind of stuff, but he won't have Dr. Judy Wood on, and so that she can talk about her evidence. So that's got to leave you with some questions. Now, there were other anomalies as well, and this is already major anomalies that cannot be explained by thermal or kinetic mechanisms taking down 3 buildings with only 2 planes or whatever. But Dr. Wood wanted to see where that dust went that was going up into the upper atmosphere. And then she noticed something very, very strange off the coast of New York City, which nobody ever really talked about. And I don't think a lot of people actually know about this. So let's quickly play the video with regards to what she found when she started looking at satellite pictures of the day.
Okay, let's go to... I think that's 19, right?
Correct.
So I wanted to see how far up the dust went, and then I looked at some weather satellite maps, and I saw this.
Hurricane Aaron. It's a Category 3 hurricane that was heading towards New York City for 4 days prior to 9/11. It had been around for a lot longer than that, but it made a beeline to New York City for 4 days straight. What is really weird is that we didn't really hear much about it. How can they be 100% sure when and where that thing's going to turn around? A flight attendant who flew out of Boston that morning contacted me after he saw this on my website and said, we never were told about that. Flight attendants weren't even told about it. Now, there was a high pressure system coming in from the west, but on day one, they thought that was going to cause it to turn around from the text messaging from the National Hurricane Center, and it didn't turn around. On day 2, they thought it was going to turn around. It didn't. Day 3, they thought it was going to turn around. It didn't. Day 4, they thought it was going to turn around. Well, it's a good thing it did, because they're out of time, because it was right at the end of Long Island, and it was also raining on Cape Cod from the outer bands of the hurricane. And you can't evacuate however many millions of people live in Manhattan. And it wasn't zero reporting, it was well underreported. And you know that weather stations love to milk him for all they can get. They, dramatize the hurricane's coming, are you ready, are you ready? And everybody gets excited about it. This went without a mention. So that was strange in itself. And then I start wondering, okay, what do hurricanes do? And they produce a static field around them. And people talk about feeling the weather change. People with arthritis often describe feeling the weather coming because they're sensing an electrical kind of atmosphere around the storm system. So, okay, I went and looked at the weather reports for the 3 major airports surrounding Manhattan, LaGuardia, JFK, and Newark airports, and all 3 reported having thunder on 9/11.
Now, the unusual thing is that on the 12th of September, it made a right-hand turn of about 135 degrees and headed off out towards Newfoundland. And during the events of 9/11, between about 8 a.m. in the morning and 5 p.m., it held its position. The atmospheric pressure remained constant. The temperature and wind speed remained almost constant right throughout the events of 9/11. Not only that, readings from magnetometers, which are instruments which measure the strength of the Earth's magnetic field, showed unusual variations in the Earth's magnetic field, again, throughout the events of 9/11.
And we just to expand on the magnetic field, the next video just ties into the anomalous magnetic field fluctuations for each and every event on 9/11. And when we talk about every event, we talk about the airplane-shaped holes being created, both towers going down, Building 7 going down, the Shanksville incident, and the Pentagon incident.
Interesting.
What the hell was that?
There was a spike in the Earth's magnetic field for every event on 9/11.
The first one is WTC-1 getting an airplane-shaped hole.
It seems this would include the Pentagon event and Shanksville.
Let's look at the Earth's magnetic field, just out of curiosity. Well, first we look at all of the weather. Now, as that high pressure system moved eastward, the pressure increased. As Hurricane Aaron moved towards New York City, the pressure began to decrease. So that shows pretty much when they were fighting each other, right at 10 a.m. on 9/11. The Earth's magnetic field was pretty consistent until the North Tower got its hole. 20 minutes before the North Tower got its hole. And then South Tower got its hole and the 2 towers went away. And all afternoon, remember when Building 7 had all the lather coming out of it? And then Building 7 went poof and things were almost back to normal. This was not there was a solar storm that hit the Earth the following day, not this day. So this was just something weird. We're going to look at this in a little bit more detail. These were all recorded in Alaska at 5 different stations. Here's the closer view. You can see that all the values start going down here, and they start going up again right after the tower gets its hole.
And that's from 5 different stations that picked that stuff up. It is exactly the same with regards to the seismic readings. There was actually a yeah, we'll get to that now. There was actually a major earthquake from the Fox Islands 5,000 miles away, and that was picked up by the same seismographs that was picking up the Twin Towers and Building 7 as well. Now, I alluded to John Hutchinson earlier with regards to his work with Los Alamos and Colonel John Alexander. This is an interview with John Alexander. There's another one that he recently did on the Sean Ryan show in August of 2024. It was a 5-hour marathon, and he was basically tasked with developing all weird and wonderful non-lethal stuff, microwaves, telepathy, all these weird and wonderful things. I think they also made the movie Men Who Talk with Goats, and that was basically skewed on the work that Colonel John Alexander did. So if you've got a little bit of time and you want to listen to everything that gentleman has managed to do with that Sean Ryan interview, he also touched on John Hutchinson and then the development of directed energy weapons with the first CO2 laser that they cut the wings off planes in mid-flight in 1963 already. So let's have a listen to the work that he did with John Hutchinson in Los Alamos in 1986.
Write in your book Reality Denied about some experiences that were technically considered failures, but that you believe had a lot of merit to them. One of them you refer to known as the Hutchinson effect.
Yep. That was one that is really highly controversial. It began, George Hathaway and another Canadian had shown us a film of some things that looked really, really strange. We had items that were levitating, accelerating, burning. One of the problems was the range of effects.
Yeah.
So in that case, I actually paid them to recreate the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, he had discovered a number of these things kind of spontaneously.
But the U.S. military took an interest.
Well, we did for a while. The problem, frankly, is control.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot control the effects, but they're certainly interesting. For instance, they showed me he had a crankshaft. Remember, he's grabbing crap literally out of the junkyard.
Yeah.
And had exposed to it. They took it to BC Hydro for testing. And the same piece of metal on one end is case hardened steel. On the other end is, soft as lead.
Uh-huh.
And it just from being exposed to things.
Mm-hmm.
We had PVC that literally was pulverized and disappeared. Another one, it took a rat tail file, put it between 2 wooden boards, put it in there. It lit up just like, remember the old incandescent light bulbs?
Sure.
We have a wire across there, and just like that, it lights up. Got to the point the whole file, which is as big as my finger, just lit up and broke apart.
Split in two.
The interesting piece was, it had been white hot. They reached in and picked it up, and it was cold.
That was pretty risky.
Yes. It appears that these effects were known to people at Los Alamos as early as 1983. In other words, this strange warping of metal, the levitation effect, which John was creating sporadically. Initially, John was not able to create these effects reliably, but as he worked on this and worked out how to tune his equipment, he was able to create effects very quickly within a few minutes. And we have done several interviews with John where he talks about his work and research. And in 2007, Dr. Judy Wood filed a court case, and John Hutchison submitted an affidavit in Dr. Wood's court case.
Upon examination of the destructive effects done to the World Trade Center on 9/11, as documented by Dr. Judy Wood and as reviewed by me, I can and do assert that the World Trade Center was destroyed by devices that are scaled up, refined, and or weaponized versions of the effects that I have named the Hutchison effect. Levitation of heavy objects, the spontaneous fracturing of metals, changes in the crystalline structure and physical properties of metals, fusion of dissimilar materials such as metal and wood while lacking any displacement, the anomalous heating of metals without burning adjacent material, and the disappearance of metal samples. I have witnessed the tops of steel bars turn to dust and white powders as well as chrome plating being blown off other samples. In the years from and after 1979, many members of the so-called and aptly named military-industrial complex have visited my lab, corresponded with me, and or in a variety of other respects, observed my work and my inventions.
So yeah, that is some of the work that he did for Los Alamos. And now if we can go to the next picture so that we can look at some of the experiments that he did and the similarities. Is there any way that we can make that a little bit bigger?
Yeah, let me see if I can do that.
If not, it's not going to be the end of the world. I can just quickly ram through it because I know it pretty well. Okay, so no, that's fine. Now, on the top picture on the left, he was trying to replicate the Philadelphia experiment where the guys tried to get a fighter ship to go invisible. And basically what happened when they did that is what he would do is as soon as he switched off his gizmos around the boat, all of a sudden and it was a plastic boat that he was using, just spontaneous fires will just rip onto the side of that boat. And then again, with regards to what he did with the beams, he could bend them on that weird and wonderful way, just like that horseshoe bend that's also displayed in the Memorial Museum. When it comes to the jellification, where they basically just kind of like pulled apart. You've got similar type of effects at the World Trade Center, and that is another piece that is on display at the 9/11 Memorial. Then obviously with these lifting and disintegration of metals, that is in relation to the vehicles that all had levitation effects to them. There were also people that talked about whilst they were running in this dust cloud that was coming over them, that they were basically picked up and thrown for a certain amount of distance. And if we can go to the next picture, please. Might have to minimize it again.
Let's do this. Let's do view. Zoom in.
Because you also ended up, what he managed to do with the Red Bull can, it had this weird burnt hole into the side of it. And you saw a lot of the vehicles parked around the World Trade Center, of that 1,400 of them, a lot of them had these anomalous, weird holes in them as well. So how can iron microspheres in the dust cloud cause things like that to happen? It's more similar to the Hutchison effect. And the transmutation effect with that is an aluminium bar, and they're not supposed to rust. And there was a rapid onset of rust on a lot of the vehicles that were parked around the World Trade Center. A lot of the steel beams and everything rusted immediately in ways that you would expect only after many years of being in the weather. And then you could create strange holes in solid metal rods. That's pretty much congruent to what you saw with Building 6 in Vesey Street, and then also in Building 5. And then weird and wonderful fuming, like you saw, that went on for 100 days afterwards. They were actually, I think Dr. Wood visited the Ground Zero in 2008, and they were still hosing off certain areas that were in ground zero. So again, it's a bunch of weird and wonderful anomalies that cannot be explained by a jetliner flying into a building or a fire-induced collapse, kinetic or thermal mechanisms bringing down a building in a controlled demolition. Again, it's more evidence of and anomalies that cannot be explained, and nobody really wants to look at this. You can't just nitpick certain aspects that you want to fit your narrative. And when we think about this technology, obviously John Hutchinson was working for Colonel John Alexander in 1986. He was also working alongside them on the Star Wars program, and in that documentary episode with Jesse Ventura, he was talking about some of the Star Wars scientists that just died mysteriously or committed suicide and all of that. And when they double-checked his statement, they found out that 22 scientists on the Star Wars program all just either had a strange boating accident or committed suicide, 22 of them. So that's a little bit of a coincidence. And the only reason that John Hutchinson is still alive is because he's a little bit cuckoo, and he acts as if he's cuckoo. He dons a wig and he looks like a really crazy person. And I think that's the only thing that's kept him alive all these years. And to think that he was a self-taught guy. He found the work of Nikola Tesla very interesting, and he ended up going to army surplus stores, buying up all these equipment and tinkering around until he figured this stuff out. And that was in the late 1970s. And that's when, in 1983, John Alexander and them heard about him. Now, something that was also very interesting is there was this whole arms race in the 1980s. Everything was sci-fi. There was a whole bunch of new technologies and everything coming out. And then in 1985, there was a special on CNN with Lieutenant Colonel Tom E. Bearden, and he was a physicist. He did a lot of research into free energy, perpetual motion, all of that kind of stuff. And then now I just want to play a short little snippet from that 1985 special on RF weaponry, mind control, and all of that. And just to give you an idea of what they were seeing.
Bearden believes that these satellite photographs are of mysterious non-nuclear explosions near an uninhabited island in the East Siberian Sea, and that they are discharges from an RF weapon that uses intersecting energy beams called scalars.
In doing so, you can create, for example, either an electromagnetic explosion at a distance, or you can create an electromagnetic implosion at a distance, the extraction of energy from a distant point. This would look like a cold explosion, so to speak. Or you can create an electromagnetic implosion at a distance, the extraction of energy from a distant point. This would look like a cold explosion, so to speak. This would look like a cold explosion, so to speak.
And that's what we had on 9/11. There was no heat. It was a new phenomena. It is new physics. It is sci-fi. It is something that you can't believe. And that is the one thing, if you remember, if you know, Edgar Fouché, he did this whole presentation once where he was talking about, okay, I would like to, he went to his superiors and he was working in Area 51, and he told one of his superiors, man, I want to write about the stuff that we do here. And would that be okay? And the guy said, well, you can write about stuff in a fictional manner, but you're not allowed to write about what you are doing. So what did Fouché do? He ended up going around writing about what his friends did. And I think this is also a way of getting people conditioned in a way that maybe some of these realizations and stuff that they actually are doing in covert black operations trickles into sci-fi, and then they put it in a movie. And if you ever do this in real life, people will just say, hey man, that stuff from movies, that sci-fi stuff, there's no way that you can actually really do that. And I think that is one of the main problems that people have when they are thrust into the work of Dr. Wood is because it's just completely outside their scope. Because the only thing is, if I look at something like that and it's going, then it must be a bomb or something like that. They're not ready to take that third step away from the limited hangout that they find themselves in. And unfortunately, now I've got to come in and I've got to try and wake people up to the disinformation being peddled by architects for an engineered truth, Richard Gage, David Chandler, and all these guys with their whole thermite angle that they want to throw. Because even since the paper that Niels Harrit and Stephen E. Jones wrote with regards to the thermite being found in the dust samples, there's been major contention about that. It's been debunked. People don't know about it. But for the last 15, 20 years, close to 20 years, Richard Gage has been going on with where they found thermite in the dust, but unfortunately it's not the truth. So let's just take a little bit of a step back with the people that have tried to expose Stephen E. Jones and his his fraudulent evidence that he presents.
Allegations of bias are something that Stephen Jones is familiar with. In his paper, Why Indeed Did the WTC Buildings Collapse?, he used this photograph with the annotation, workers evidently peering into hot core under the WTC rubble. This photograph was doctored. This is the original, and the glow that you actually see is from a portable light used by the workmen as they searched through the rubble.
And this is a video of it that I found just to bring it back to people so that they can see what he did. Because if that's molten metal and that's heat from underneath the stuff, those guys won't be sticking their hands into a rubble pile that's 1,000 degrees hot. We've got that stories of the melting boots and all of that. And a fireman's boots are built to withstand 650 degrees Fahrenheit before their soles melt. That isn't a hot rubble pile.
Not even close. Can't be. That's what Jones was selling on.
Yeah, still selling.
Involvement in this seems suspect, and his methods also seem suspect. And that is how the nanothermite narrative began. So knowing that, we then have to...
I've had David Hughes on my show a couple times.
Yeah.
Great researcher.
Ask some pretty serious questions about that narrative and the characters and institutions which have sustained it down the years.
And this also was at the similar moment as the launch of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, right?
Well, that's the major one, you see. I forget what year, I think maybe 2007 that was launched. And this is the major institution which has exerted the most sway, I would argue, over the so-called 9/11 Truth community. In other words, anyone who has skepticism about the official version of events, they look into it briefly. They find this organization which claims to represent something like 3,600 architects and engineers. In other words, it's presenting this kind of credentialed front. Mm-hmm. Except when you look into it, it turns out that these are people who have claimed to be architects and engineers, and most of them probably are, but they've signed a statement at some point in the last 20 odd years, kind of confirming the architects and engineers position. In actual fact, in terms of the number of people working for this organization, when you look at it, it's only about 10 or 12 or something. And yet, for years, they put on conferences and had guest speakers and so on, and really drew people's perception in that way and directed it strongly towards this idea of nanothermite. And what's particularly egregious about this organization is its treatment of Dr. Wood and her research. It's completely dishonest, and it has a single page on its website relating to Wood's research, and it's just full of straw manning, not presenting it honestly, not dealing with the key points, It says, for example, that the toasted cars are because there was what it calls, was it thermitic material drifting down, burning and singeing the cars. It's using this kind of heat narrative again, all of which doesn't stack up at all, in my view. And then again, just the nature of some of the characters that have been involved here. Andrew Johnson's 2 books I would recommend in the first instance. 9/11 Finding the Truth and 9/11 Holding the Truth.
Must read.
This is a compendium of all of the attempts to attack and discredit Dr. Wood's work down the years, including many of the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. But the lead character was Richard Gage. He stepped down a couple of years ago. But Richard Gage, he comes across as this kind of avuncular, friendly chap, and you can trust me, I'm smiley and friendly and nice and all the rest of it. But he's always sought to close down Wood's work. And I actually had the opportunity to deal one-on-one with Gage a couple of years ago in a discussion forum. And I put a simple question to him. It was about the Freon tanks.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, how come that these massive Freon tanks didn't explode and were retrieved completely intact if there's all this molten metal underground and the towers had collapsed on them? And his response was, oh, I didn't know about that. Are you serious? You are claiming to be, the expert on the destruction of these buildings for the last 2 decades, and you're telling me that you don't know about the Freon tanks. It's completely unbelievable.
Yeah. And then the next video will just give us a little bit of a background of who and what Stephen E. Jones is, because remember, the Scholars for 9/11 Truth was started by Jim Fetzer and Stephen E. Jones in 2005. Dr. Wood got involved somewhere in 2006 and early 2007. She left. There was another gentleman with her, Dr. Morgan Reynolds. Dr. Morgan Reynolds filed a suit against NIST for the fraudulent plane impact studies. He was like the first original no-planer on the 10th anniversary. It was on the 5th anniversary or whatever. He was on the TV where he was talking about it being impossible for planes to fly that low at that speed and all of that. And then he and Dr. Wood were ostracized. They ended up filing their own separate QTAM cases in 2007. And by 2010, when Dr. Wood's book came out, then the vetting processes on Architects for Engineered Truth basically said that if somebody signs the petition, you've got to go check their name, you've got to go check their surname, you've got to go check their email, you've got to go check their social media history and search and make sure if they mention no planes anywhere or they mention Dr. Wood, then they won't be allowed to be on the petition. And that also ties into Wikipedia, strangely enough, because if you try and write a page on Wikipedia about Dr. Wood, it gets denied. It was basically confirmed by the Wikipedia moderators in 2010 that she is on a block list. So let's just go back into a little bit short history on who and what Dr. Stephen E. Jones is.
The Truth Movement won't even discuss the airplanes. The interesting thing is, a lot of people controlling the Truth Movement know all about this technology.
This is Chris from Wolf Clan Media.
Yes.
He's been on my show a couple times. 9/11 Alchemy
Great
is
guy.
his dog, yeah.
Yeah, people need to watch 9/11 Alchemy, all three his documentaries, because I think it is the best researched, in-depth documentaries that you can find. It goes through all the narratives through the years. It debunks all the CGI nonsense, the remote control planes, all of that. And he worked hand in hand with a gentleman from the UK called Mark Conlon, who writes under the name of 9/11 Planes Research. You can find him on Substack, and you can also find him on X. He's not that involved on X, but he's put on, I think, 150 of his articles, and he's been researching everything plane related for the last 15 years, really, really in depth. But yeah, sorry for the interjection.
It's all right. I've had an episode with Chris on 9/11 alchemy, so people can check that out. The video
I saw that. Yeah.
And they're actively trying to cover it up.
Give us your background, some of the publications you've written for.
Sure. Let's see, Los Alamos National Lab. The article is Cold Nuclear Fusion. Principal investigator for the Department of Energy.
Amazing. So you've headed up investigations for the government before.
Yeah. Oh,
when you titled this video Jones the Spook, I wasn't sure which Jones you were talking about, or both Jones.
Both of them.
Two spooks like log rolling for each other.
Been around the block a few times.
So Jones, I think, knew about all of those effects and was briefed on some of them as well. If he didn't already know, I'm pretty sure of that.
The cold fusion part of it. In fact, that was the title Paul Palmer and I gave to what we were doing, which is, we sometimes called it metal catalyzed fusion because the fusion occurs in metals. Fusion occurs in metals and metals and metals.
The connections that Jones has between the cold fusion experience that everybody can read about in Dr. Malov's book, and with what's going on right now with the 9/11 situation, it's just a mirror image of him muddling up 9/11.
Eugene Malov died. I didn't know that when I made my first film.
Oh, did you not? Oh, yeah. I became familiar with him and his work about a year before he died. I think they killed him basically because of Jones. Because I think that as soon as Jones came on the scene, Malov would have smelled a rat. You know, he would have known. When Jones was talking about 9/11, Malov would have known there was a connection between cold fusion and 9/11 straight away. He talked about it wasn't just thermite; it was thermate, which is where you add sulfur to the thermite, because he said that there was sulfidation of the steel.
It's a good question, but there is an answer. The answer is with sulfur added.
So what I think why Jones said that was in case anybody detected this sulfur in the steel, and then they'd say, oh yeah, well that's the thermate.
And showed traces of sulfur, which is consistent with the byproduct of thermate.
No, it's not. That's more evidence of transmutation. What's rusting? It's oxidation. So what's oxidation? It's the addition of oxygen. And what does sulfidation mean? It means the addition of sulfur to the mixture. What's sulfur? Sulfur is a compound and the atomic number is 32. How do you get 32? Well, how about adding two 16s together? What's the atomic number for oxygen?
16?
16. So two oxygen molecules joining together and creating this sulfidation effect on the steel. We've got these charge clusters, which is in Dr. Wood's book. It's that Ken Shoulders talked about, and that is these charge clusters which produce the nuclear effects.
Yeah, and just to give you guys a little bit of background on Eugene Malov, he wrote the book Fire from Ice, and he was working with MIT, and when they were doing the cold fusion experiments with Pons and Fleischmann, Stephen E. Jones was a guy who basically railroaded their careers by calling it cold fusion. And at that time, billions were being spent on hot fusion, trying to recreate the sun so that they can get a new energy source. Now you've got this Pons and Fleischmann guy coming by, and they were doing their own little experiment, and all of a sudden they are doing what they called a low energy nuclear reaction without any ionizing radiation, with abundant tritium being created, and it was seen as brand new physics. The physicists couldn't believe it, and that's why they were railroaded. And unfortunately, the day after that they went public, the Exxon Valdez disaster happened, and then the news just shifted to that, and that's how cold fusion kind of like took the back seat. But we'll be coming back to that now, just to again show people the fraudulent evidence that was being brought forth by Stephen E. Jones and Niels Harrit and all those guys. This is a science debate that was hosted by Kevin Barrett and Rick Shaddock. They do it every year on Einstein's birthday, and they were debating thermite, and where Dr. Dennis Rancourt was against it and Dr. Joss Middledorf was the thermite proponent. And this is very interesting and very telling what Dr. Rancourt has to say about the thermite dust studies. That is the benchmark or the base that they base their whole thermite premise on in the first place.
When I wrote my first book, I was on Barrett's show 15 years ago. I wonder if that audio is still around. But yeah.
One statement you said, well, but the one statement you said, well, they found nanothermite. Well, no, they didn't. You know, if you read that paper, and I've criticized it as I would act as a reviewer for a material science paper, because I am a material scientist, and I've stated and explained why there is absolutely no reliable evidence of nanothermite presence in that dust based on the data that was reported in that paper. That is a paper that reviewers should have caught as just being untenable, that much more work was needed. And one of the main, just to give you one example of one of the fatal flaws in the paper, they analyzed for aluminum by putting dust on an aluminum holder, a pellet. You need a conducting pellet when you do these measurements in electron microanalysis. Well, they put a little bit of dust on an aluminum slug. You're always going to get an aluminum signal from that. There's no way to avoid it. And that's what they did. And when I pointed this out, they said, yeah, we know, but we're going to do it. We're going to do the measurements again on a different slug, on a non-aluminum slug. I said, great, send me the results when you get them. They never did it. So, you know, if you were to use one word regarding the results of that paper, it would be unreliable. And I'm being polite, okay? No, none of the people, the first author of the paper is not even a material scientist. He'd never used these characterization methods before. I taught these characterization methods at the graduate level at university for years. I know exactly what the artifacts are. They did all the things you should never do, and then they concluded something which you couldn't conclude based on their data, and then it became what everyone's talking about. So it's just not reliable at all. There's no evidence of nanothermite presence at all in the dust from that paper. Now, if in the recent year or two they redid the measurements and they published it, I didn't see it, well, that's something else. But the paper that everyone is citing and talking about, and that was even reviewed in the European Journal of Association Journal recently, a couple years ago, it's a nonsense paper. I'm sorry, but it's wrong, and it normally would not have been published. Now, I'm fine with people publishing things on the internet and having it critiqued openly and so on, but normally using rigorous peer review, that paper would not have been published. In fact, 2 editors-in-chief of that publication resigned over that paper, 2 in a row. So, yeah, no, you can't say there was nanothermite there, in my opinion.
Yeah, Denis Rancourt, for people who don't know, he's also a great COVID investigator as well.
Yeah. Yeah, they brought out a huge study recently where they could prove like 17 million people died of the vaccine.
Yeah.
Now,
worldwide.
This short little video here is just to bring it back again for people who still will say, no, but there is definitely still thermite after all of this that we've just bloody well showed you. Just wait before you play it. This is 100 pounds of thermite in action. Now, architects and engineers and Niels Harrit calculated if you use thermite to sever all the columns in a tower, you would need 29,000 metric tons. Now, imagine that, 29,000 metric tons. Number one, how do you get it in there? And secondly, if you see what this reaction of 100 pounds is, blow that up to 29,000 metric tons on a building that's 1,300 feet high.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Holy shit!
Yeah, I've heard this thermite theory from this.
There. So far, the only talking head out there, love him, hate him. I don't know what people think about old Stu Peters. I think he's a little bit batshit crazy here and there. But he's the only guy who's actually stuck his neck out so far. He's actually had, this is an interview he had with Andrew Johnson in 2023. He had him back on again in 2024, along with Ken O'Keefe, where they talked about this. And he's the only guy so far that's actually talking about this. I've emailed Tucker Carlson and Sean Ryan, all the big guys, redacted everybody, and I've dropped comments in their X's, and I think in 2020, beginning 2023, I joined X, and I would drop stuff in his X, and then they contacted me and asked if I want to come on, and I told them, no, you speak to Andrew Johnson. He's the guy that you actually need to speak to. And that just shows you, why are all the other podcasters, Joe Rogan, who's got the book, Eddie Bravo, who's got the book, and Alex Jones, who's known about her for the last 15 years.
Why not?
Who instructed them, or what the hell are they scared of?
This guy called Richard Gage.
Correct.
And the question that I have about that, and maybe we'll talk to him in the upcoming days, but thermite is a very bright, like it has this light that emanates.
That's right.
It's white. It burns hot, white hot.
Yeah.
And it's blinding, a very small amount of it. Enough thermite to take down buildings of that size, 110-story structures like that. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that would look like a quarter of the sun was burning in New York City.
Go to the next slide, number 7, and you'll get a kind of feel for that. And this, again, you're exactly right, Stu.
So, yeah. We are nearly finished. Now, the thing is, in the previous video where we were talking about Malov, he, in his book Fire and Ice, he actually mentioned Stephen E. Jones 300 times, because they were superseding and falsifying the data on cold fusion, and he ended up getting beaten to death outside his house.
Wow.
Now, this is an excerpt from the...
who got beat up?
Sorry?
Who was beaten up outside of their house?
Eugene Malov, the
Okay,
MIT
so that was
professor. He actually resigned from MIT after he saw them fudging the numbers on cold fusion. And also, here they were talking to Dr. Wood. They are going to mention her assistant. And strangely enough, this event happened to him after Dr. Wood and he worked on a paper proving that aluminium can glow in sunlight, because everybody was trying to make the case for, before the South Tower went down, you saw this, what seems to be sparklers, or they say that might be thermite or whatever, or molten steel falling out of the building. And they proved to Stephen E. Jones, sorry, dude, but that could be the aluminium cladding, that could be basically anything. And just because it glows in sunlight doesn't mean it's molten metal. And let's hear what they asked Dr. Wood about intimidation.
Device. In other words, not a bomb, not something that, like a bullet flies from point A to point B and hits something.
Yeah.
Or something that produces heat, like, a nuke or something. It's a directed energy device.
There's one more thing that has me thinking Judy Wood is on the right trail.
Have you ever experienced any backlash for your research? I mean, has there been any death threats or anything like that in terms of your own safety or people that you know?
Yes. I guess I don't feel comfortable talking about it because, it's sort of like giving positive feedback that, oh, we got to it, let's do it again.
Her research assistant, the only person working with her on the 9/11 case, was murdered, shot on a sidewalk.
What was the assistant's name? Do you know?
I've got it here somewhere. Give me 2 seconds. Let me just quickly find it.
So
just quickly.
That's okay. Let's watch this video.
I've got it here. I've got it here. I've got it here. His name
asked the
is
American.
His name is Michael A. Zabur. Michael A. Zabur.
How do you spell his last name?
Zebuhr.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, let's watch this last video.
Physical Society, the top physics organization in America, to recommend an independent scientist. They gave us Rob Duncan, Vice Chancellor of Research at the University of Missouri and an expert in measuring energy.
When we first called you and said, we'd like you to look into cold fusion for 60 minutes, what did you think when you hung up the phone?
I think my first reaction was something like, well, hasn't that been debunked?
He crunched the numbers himself and searched for an explanation other than a nuclear effect.
I found that the work done was carefully done and that the excess heat, as I see it now, is quite real.
Are you surprised to hear yourself saying this?
Very much. I never thought I'd say that.
And we found that the Pentagon is saying it too. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, known as DARPA, did its own analysis, and we obtained this internal memo that concludes there is, quote, no doubt that anomalous excess heat is produced in these experiments.
Do you feel vindicated after all these years?
I don't have any real need for vindication. I know what I've seen.
That was a pretty big smile on your face, though.
It's good. It's not bad. Certainly it's good.
Now the Pentagon is funding more experiments at the Naval Research Lab in Washington, D.C., and at McCoubrey's lab in California.
If you ask me, is this going to have any impact on our energy policy? It's impossible to say because we don't fundamentally understand the process yet. But to say that we don't fundamentally understand the process, and that's why we're not going to study it, is like saying I'm too sick to go to the doctor.
You know, I wonder how you feel about going public endorsing this phenomenon on 60 Minutes when maybe 90%, I'm guessing, of your colleagues think that it's crackpot science.
I certainly was among those 90% before I looked at the data. And I can see where they'll be very concerned when they see this piece. All I have to say is read the published results, talk to the scientists, never let anybody else do your thinking for you.
Yeah, never let anybody else do the thinking for you. That's the golden rule. Just because the guy's got a platform and a lot of followers or whatever doesn't mean that what he's always saying is right, doesn't mean he basically researched it well. You've got to go do some of your own due diligence. You can't expect people to tell you what's going on. And this is what was shown to us on 9/11, what the technology in play could give us and the whole world effortless clean energy. Exposing this clean energy technology means an end to the ruling elite's ability to control and exploit the general population through scarce, expensive, dirty, and inefficient resources such as coal, oil, nuclear, and renewables. And this is basically what's keeping us enslaved. It's been suppressed since 1989. Imagine you've got a small little cold fusion reactor in your house that can power your house forever and ever, or something like that in your car. You'll never have to plug it in again. The technology is out there. At the moment, DARPA came out in 2023 where they were working on Nikola Tesla's wireless energy, where they are shooting laser beams from a distance to US military bases. And I read an article earlier this year where they've been showing success in doing that. And that's something that Tesla wanted to give us over 120 years ago. And that's when JP Morgan told him, but how the hell am I going to put a flippin' meter on that? And that's the main thing. And that's what people need to realize with the tie-in with Stephen E. Jones, who worked for the Department of Energy, all this military industrial complex guys who were in charge in security and cleanup, writing the NIST reports and all of that. This is what's being kept away from us. And people just need to realize I know it's sci-fi or whatever, but go read up, go watch a little bit, go watch the documentary Heavy Watergate. You can find that on cold fusion and all of that. And then you'll see the bigger picture. But when it comes to 9/11, you can't just nitpick the evidence that you want to look at. You've got to look at the whole sum, and that'll give you an idea of what really went down. And that's pretty much it. Please go watch Dr. Wood's Breakthrough Energy Conference presentation she did in 2020, because that's what changed my life. You can read Andrew Johnson's 2 books that chronicles all the disinformation since the formation of Scholars for 9/11 Truth all the way to 2019. Look for the website nomoregames.net. That's Dr. Morgan Reynolds, who did all the plane stuff. Go look into Mark Conlon's work on 9/11 planes research. The 9/11 Truth movement is a disinformation movement. They are moving you away from the truth. And if more people could have woken up to this when Dr. Wood came out in 2010, maybe COVID wouldn't have happened, because then everybody could see a psyop coming before you fell into the bloody trap.
They can't imagine a psyop that ornate, that sophisticated, without any limits on money. Really, they don't.
Yeah.
They're not concerned about spending money or buying people. So
yeah, but remember Pentagon the day before that, 2.3 trillion that they couldn't account for, and 9/11 definitely wasn't planned over a bloody weekend. It was decades in the making.
Yeah, the date everything was down to, and that's why there was that hurricane. It was to make sure the rest of the sky was clear, right?
Yeah,
like that
because on the 10th of September there was a major electrical storm the previous evening, so the air there was already very static. And when you talk, the other day I had a huge debate on X with a guy with the name of Mike Barrow, who's a UFO guy, and he was an Ancient Aliens and everything. And this guy's trying to tout planes and all of that. And I titled my article about him, when E.T. goes home with your brain in a jar, and then you're left with Mike Barra.
And that's on your Substack?
And that's on my Substack.
Okay,
yeah,
I'll
I
put a link to
basically
your
put in
Substack.
the recording in there and put in extra pictures showing how disingenuous he is. And that's what you find. Even I've challenged Richard Gage to a conversation. His lackeys from the War Room, Gene Laratonda, and all these guys, Kevin Ryan. None of those guys want to go head on head with an evidence-based discussion, because as soon as you do that, their jig is up.
Right.
And if you go into their comment sections, you mention Dr. Wood, you mention Dr. Morgan Reynolds, you are immediately blocked.
They can't stand up to scrutiny. They cannot stand up to scrutiny. When you cannot debate somebody or even just have a dialogue, like even a dialogue is okay. Like you don't have to be in contentious head-to-head debate, just a dialogue. They're avoiding a dialogue is very telling.
Yeah, there's another gentleman that people can look up. His name is Adam Eisenberg. He was a infantryman at the Pentagon. He was tasked with the cleanup, body removal. There's a bunch of his interviews on my Rumble. A bunch of other people have interviewed him as well. He's chronicled his interaction with Richard Gage and a whole bunch of 9/11 truthers with his research and everything. And what he has to say about them is also very, very enlightening in the way that they treated him. And he's an eyewitness. He was in the Pentagon. He was moving people out there. And a person like David Chandler, who wants to make you think that Building 7 went down to a controlled demolition, wants you to believe a plane flew into the Pentagon.
Right.
So
Norman,
that's it.
Thank you for your presentation. There will not be a part 3. This is the part 2 of 1 and 2. I'll put links to Norman's Substack. We had 200 live listeners, so thank you, everybody, for listening. And please share the show and share the link so people can watch this. And thank you so much for your time. Have a great weekend. Thanks, Norman.
Yeah.
Thank you
so
for your
much.
presentation. Yeah, let's do that.